In the days when the forest still answered to drums and the spirits still walked freely between trees, there lived a hunter named OBINNA, a man whose life had been shaped by soil, sweat, and silence. He came from a lineage of hunters in an IGBO land where the forest was not merely a place of trees but a living ancestor, one that rewarded respect and punished arrogance. OBINNA hunted not for praise but for survival, for his compound was full of hungry mouths and aging parents whose bones no longer allowed them to farm. On the morning he entered the forest for what would become his final hunt as a free man. The sky was strangely pale, and the elders noticed the birds flying low, a sign that something unseen was already moving. His wife rubbed white chalk on his wrist, whispering prayers to the spirits of the land, while OBINNA tightened the leather strap of his hunting bag and promised to return before sunset. He trusted the forest, for he had never taken more than he needed, and he trusted men, for betrayal had never yet come from those he called brothers. As he stepped into the thick green womb of the forest, the air grew heavy, and the paths he knew so well seemed to fold inward, as though the land itself was holding its breath. OBINNA had not gone far when the forest fell unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence elders warn children about, the silence that means something ancient has lifted its head. Without warning, the ground beneath him shifted, and from the undergrowth burst a massive wild animal, older than fear itself, its body scarred from past battles and its eyes burning with a knowing that chilled the soul. It struck OBINNA down with a force that cracked bone and breath alike, pinning him to the earth as though reminding him that no man truly owns the forest. OBINNA screamed, not in cowardice but in pain and disbelief, waiting for death to claim him the way it had claimed so many others. But the animal did not kill him. It pressed him into the soil, its breath hot against his face, holding him there for hours while ants crawled over his wounds and the sun climbed and fell again. In that long imprisonment, OBINNA understood something terrible, that the animal was not hungry, not angry, but judging. When it finally released him, stepping back slowly and vanishing into the trees, OBINNA was left broken, unable to stand, his body alive but his spirit shaken to its roots. He lay there calling on the names of ancestors, on the gods of the land, on any human voice that might hear him, unaware that the greatest danger would not come from the forest, but from the heart of a man. In the days when the forest still answered to drums and the spirits still walked freely between trees, there lived a hunter named OBINNA, a man whose life had been shaped by soil, sweat, and silence. He came from a lineage of hunters in an IGBO land where the forest was not merely a place of trees, but a living ancestor, one that rewarded respect and punished arrogance. As night bled into morning, footsteps approached, and OBINNA felt hope rise like water in a dry throat. The man who appeared was Nwoye, another hunter from the same village, someone OBINNA had shared meat with, someone whose children had eaten from OBINNA's kills during hard seasons. Nwoye gasped at the sight of him, feigning shock and sorrow, and lifted OBINNA onto his back with words of comfort and promises of safety. OBINNA wept quietly as they moved through the forest, believing the gods had finally answered him. But the forest, which hears everything, caught Nwoye's whispered confessions, words soaked in envy, resentment, and long-hidden bitterness. For Nwoye had always lived in OBINNA's shadow, always second in skill, second in honor, second in respect. As they walked, Nwoye deliberately chose the longest paths, stopping often, pretending fatigue, while OBINNA's wounds bled afresh. At a lonely clearing where the trees leaned inward like witnesses, Nwoye lowered OBINNA to the ground and spoke the truth at last. He confessed that he had followed OBINNA that day, hoping the forest would claim him, hoping to return with stories of bravery and gain the respect OBINNA had always owned. He admitted that rescuing him had been a mistake, one he now intended to correct. Leaving OBINNA helpless and half-dead, Nwoye turned away, carrying not a man on his back anymore but the weight of his own betrayal while the forest watched in silence. Back in the village, Nwoye told a carefully shaped lie, saying OBINNA had been careless, that the forest had taken him, and that there had been nothing he'd do. The women wailed, the men mourned, and OBINNA's wife sat on the bare earth, her grief quiet and heavy, because deep inside her, she felt the lie breathing. Days passed, and vultures circled the forest edge, but OBINNA did not die. The same forest that had judged him now protected him, sheltering him with fallen leaves and guiding a wandering herbalist who followed signs older than words. OBINNA was carried home alive, though scarred and changed, and when the truth spilled from his lips, the village reeled. Nwoye was summoned, and under the gaze of elders and spirits, his lies unraveled like rotten rope. He was banished, not with violence, but with silence, which in that land was worse than death. Yet even as justice was spoken, OBINNA felt no victory, only loss. The man he had trusted, the brother he had loved, had been willing to let him rot under the trees for the sake of pride. OBINNA lived on, but he never returned to the forest as a hunter again. He became a man who warned children, who taught them that the bush may wound your body, but people can wound your soul beyond healing. The animal that spared him became a story told in hushed tones, a reminder that even beasts understand balance better than humans consumed by envy. Nwoye disappeared into distant lands, his name slowly erased from songs and memories, while OBINNA's scars became symbols of survival and sorrow. And so the elders say, to this day, that the forest remembers intentions, that animals kill only to live, but men betray to feel greater than they are. The tragedy of OBINNA's story is not that he was captured by a wild animal and lived, but that he was rescued by a man and almost died. And OBINNA was happy and leave his life. What did you learn from OBINNA's story? Drop it on the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful story. In the ancient river town of Onitsha, where the Niger moved like a living ancestor and market women sang prices like morning prayers, Mercy Nwafor was known as the girl who carried sunlight in her smile. She was the only daughter of a late transport businessman who had built wealth quietly through years of sweat, discipline, and careful trust in cooperative societies and land investments across Anambra State. When her parents died within 2 years of each other, Mercy inherited not only money, but responsibility, reputation, and a name people respected. She was not reckless with wealth. She expanded her father's small logistics office in a growing import support business that helped traders clear goods from Lagos ports. It was during one of these business trips she met Mike Ez, a tall, soft-spoken man from Enugu, who spoke about technology, global opportunities, and how Africa's future depended on young people who dared to think beyond survival. Mike treated Mercy with gentleness that felt rare. He opened doors for her, remembered small things she said, and spoke to her like she was not just beautiful, but important. Within a year, he became part of her daily life. Morning calls, evening visits, Sunday church together. When he proposed during New Yam Festival under lantern lights and drum music, Mercy believed her ancestors themselves had approved the union. He told her his biggest dream was to travel abroad, work, earn in foreign currency, and return to Nigeria to build companies that would employ thousands. He never directly asked for money at first. Instead, he shared stories of friends who had succeeded overseas and came back wealthy. Mercy listened, proud of his ambition. When he finally revealed an opportunity to relocate through a work connection abroad, but needed financial backing to secure travel, documentation, and settlement, Mercy felt fear and hope wrestle inside her. The amount was enormous, 50 million naira, almost half of her liquid inheritance. Her uncle warned her carefully that distance sometimes changes hearts. But Mike swore before church elders that Mercy was his only wife, that travel was for their future, that the moment he stabilized, he would return for a full traditional marriage. Mercy chose love. She transferred the money in installments, watching her bank balance shrink, while her heart told her she was investing in forever. The night before his flight from Lagos, he held her hands and promised, "You are not losing money. You are planting seeds. When I return, we will harvest together." Mercy believed him because in African culture, promises made while holding hands and invoking God and ancestors are not supposed to be broken. The first year after Mike left was filled with hope, strong enough to silence fear. He called Mercy every morning despite time differences. He sent videos of snowy streets, large supermarkets, and shared dreams of the house they would build in Nigeria. Mercy showed his photos proudly to relatives who had doubted. She defended him whenever anyone questioned long-distance love. But slowly, change came like harmattan dust, quiet, gradual, almost invisible until everything felt dry, Calls reduced, messages became shorter, excuses became longer, work pressure, immigration stress, new schedules. Mercy ignored the growing emptiness. She invested more into expanding her business, hoping success would make Mike proud. But the truth began revealing itself through small, painful clues. He stopped discussing wedding plans. He avoided conversations about her joining him abroad. He no longer said, "our future," to get at only my situation here. 3 years passed. Mercy rejected other marriage proposals, telling everyone she was already engaged. Then one afternoon, while helping her cousin register goods online, she saw a tagged photo on social media. Mike stood in a tailored suit beside another African woman wearing a white wedding dress in what looked like a civil wedding ceremony abroad. Mercy's body went cold. The caption read, "Grateful for love that found me when I least expected." The date showed the wedding happened 2 weeks earlier. Mercy felt her soul separate from her body as she scrolled through photos, engagement pictures, couple vacations, smiling families. When she finally gathered strength to call Mike, he answered with a long silence. Then he spoke words that would break her spirit forever. "Life changed, Mercy. I didn't plan it. Things just happened." He admitted he used part of her money to stabilize his early life abroad. He said he intended to repay someday. Mercy did not scream. She did not insult him. She simply hung up and sat on her shop floor until nightfall, feeling like every sacrifice she made had been poured into a well with no bottom. Mercy's pain became known quietly across her community. In African societies, heartbreak does not stay private. Aunties came to advise her. Some blamed her for trusting too much. Some blamed men generally. Some blamed destiny. But Mercy withdrew from everyone. She closed the shop for weeks. She stopped attending weddings. Church songs about faith made her chest ache. For months, she lived like someone walking through smoke, seeing shapes of life, but feeling disconnected from it. But Mercy was raised by a father who believed that dignity meant standing up after humiliation. Slowly, she returned to her office. She reviewed old records. She found transfer receipts, voice notes where Mike promised repayment, messages where he called the money a loan we will repay together. She spoke to a Lagos lawyer experienced in cross-border financial disputes. The lawyer explained recovery would be slow, stressful, and emotionally draining. Mercy agreed anyway, not because she wanted to destroy Mike, but because she refused to let betrayal become the final chapter of her life. The legal process forced Mercy to grow stronger. She studied financial law. She attended hearings virtually. She learned how international asset tracing worked. During this period, her business nearly collapsed because she had invested too much trust into one person. But community women she once helped began supporting her, connecting her to traders, helping her secure small contracts again. Mercy realized something powerful. While one person betrayed her, many others still respected her. That realization planted the first seeds of emotional healing. At night, she still cried. Some days, she still felt foolish. But she also began feeling something new. Anger shaped into determination rather than destruction. The revenge Mercy chose was not loud, violent, or chaotic. It did not arrive with raised voices, shattered glass, or dramatic confrontations that would feed gossip in the marketplace. It was patient. It was intelligent. It was deliberate. It was deeply rooted in African resilience, the kind that survives colonization, poverty, political instability, and broken systems without losing dignity. It was the kind of strength carried quietly in the backs of market women, in the calloused hands of farmers, in the disciplined silence of elders who understand that endurance is sometimes the sharpest weapon. Mercy did not announce her strategy. She did not threaten. She did not beg. She gathered documents. She organized records. She compiled every transfer receipt, every bank alert, every written repayment promise Mike had sent during the hopeful days when love still felt certain. She printed emails. She saved voice notes. She created a timeline. What once had been symbols of trust became evidence. Over 2 years through international legal channels, she pursued accountability with steady focus. The process was slow, procedural, and emotionally exhausting. There were forms to complete, affidavits to sign, consultations with cross-border financial investigators, and careful coordination between legal representatives in different jurisdictions. Nothing moved quickly. But Mercy had learned the discipline of patience. Authorities eventually confirmed documented transfers and written repayment promises. The records were clear. The money had moved. The agreements had existed. His overseas financial progress slowed under legal scrutiny. Routine transactions triggered reviews. Asset declarations were examined. Employment income became traceable. The systems he once believed distant and untouchable began asking structured questions. He was not destroyed, but he was held accountable. Structured repayment enforcement was tied directly to his earnings and assets. It was not emotional. It was administrative. It was not revenge in the dramatic sense. It was consequence. Mercy recovered part of her money through scheduled deductions and formal settlement agreements. Each payment was documented. Each transfer referenced case numbers and enforcement clauses. Each notification carried quiet validation. The victory was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no public humiliation, no viral scandal, no speeches, just official documents confirming he owed her. Signed papers, court stamps, compliance notices. The language was cold and procedural, but to Mercy it sounded like restoration. When Mercy received the first large recovery payment, she did not celebrate wildly. She did not host a party. She did not announce it online. She dressed simply and drove to the cemetery where her parents rested. She knelt beside their graves and placed fresh flowers on the soil. The air was still. She whispered that she had protected what they worked for. She told them she had not allowed their lifetime of discipline to vanish through betrayal. The wind moved softly through the trees as if carrying her words. With recovered funds and new business partnerships, Mercy did not retreat into caution. She expanded. She studied market gaps. She identified inefficiencies in cross-border import operations. She invested carefully. She built strategic relationships with freight handlers, customs brokers, and trade facilitators. Gradually, she expanded into logistics consulting for import traders across West Africa. Her office grew. Contracts multiplied. Referrals increased. What began as recovery evolved into reinvention. She began employing young women, graduates, apprentices, single mothers, ambitious dreamers. She trained them personally. She taught them how to read contracts line by line. She explained clauses about liability and repayment. She showed them how to verify written promises. She emphasized documentation. She insisted on financial independence. She mentored them in negotiation skills, supplier vetting, and risk assessment. She never told them not to love, but she told them never to abandon their security for promises alone. She explained that affection should not replace due diligence. She repeated that trust must be accompanied by structure. She encouraged softness of heart, but strength of mind. Mercy's reputation grew stronger than before. People admired not just her success, but her recovery story. They spoke of her resilience in business circles. They referenced her name when discussing financial literacy for women. Her journey became quiet inspiration, a reminder that betrayal does not have to define a future. Meanwhile, news reached her occasionally that Mike's marriage was struggling under financial pressure and immigration complications. Mutual acquaintances mentioned delays, debts, stress. She listened without expression. Mercy felt no joy hearing that. There was no satisfaction in his discomfort, only a quiet understanding that life balances itself eventually. She had chosen dignity over drama, structure over shouting, documentation over despair, and in that choice, she rebuilt not only her finances, but herself. Years later, the same red earth of Onitsha that had once felt heavy beneath Mercy's feet now seemed to rise in celebration of her name. The banners outside her newly completed office building fluttered in the humid breeze, their colors bright against the afternoon sky. Women from the market arrived in wrappers of bold Ankara prints. Elders sat beneath a decorated canopy, their walking sticks resting against their knees, their eyes filled with approval. Employees, young men and women she had mentored, trained, and trusted, stood proudly in neat rows, waiting for her to cut the ribbon. This was the same town where she had once closed her shop and hidden behind drawn curtains, the same streets where whispers had trailed behind her name when her long-distance love began to unravel. The same river breeze that had once carried her silent tears now carried applause. When Mercy stepped forward to speak, she did not tremble. Her voice carried strength, shaped by seasons of rebuilding. She spoke not of betrayal, not of heartbreak, not of Mike. She spoke of structure, of discipline, of investment, of learning to separate emotion from agreement, of building systems that would outlive mood, romance, and promises. The elders nodded. They understood. She had transformed betrayal into wisdom. She had turned pain into power. She had converted loss into architecture, both in concrete and within her own spirit. The office building behind her was not just cement and glass. It was proof. Proof that she had refused to collapse under shame. Proof that inheritance could be protected. Proof that a woman's financial independence was not pride, but protection. Each floor represented a decision she made differently the second time around. Every contract was reviewed carefully. Every partnership documented clearly. Every account transparent. Years after the storm, Mercy eventually married, but on her own timeline. There was no rush driven by fear of age or gossip. There was no desperation to prove she was still desirable. She waited until her heart was calm and her mind steady. Her bride price negotiations were thorough, respectful, and public. Her uncle spoke firmly. Her in-laws responded with dignity. Traditional rites were completed properly, not hurried or minimized. Palm wine was shared. Prayers were spoken. Blessings were invoked from ancestors and from God. By the time she stood as a bride again, Mercy was financially independent beyond question. She did not enter marriage looking for rescue. She entered as a partner. Her husband was not a dream seller, whispering promises of foreign lands and fast success. He was steady. He was present. He built beside her, not above her. When they discussed investments, they reviewed spreadsheets together. When they planned their home, they selected land together. When they disagreed, they resolved matters without manipulation or silence. On her wedding morning, Mercy sat before the mirror as older women adorned her with coral beads, layer upon layer resting against her collarbone. The red beads glowed against her skin, symbols of dignity, royalty, and womanhood. As the drums rehearsed in the courtyard, she paused and remembered the younger version of herself. The girl who believed love alone could secure a future. The girl who thought consistency in phone calls meant consistency in character. The girl who defended promises she did not fully verify. Mercy did not hate that girl. She did not mock her innocence. She did not wish she had never been her. Instead, she honored her. She understood that innocence had been necessary for growth. Without that hopeful, trusting version of herself, she would not have learned discernment. Without that heartbreak, she would not have mastered boundaries. Without that humiliation, she would not have built unshakable standards. She smiled gently at her reflection. The woman in the mirror was respected, wise, unbreakable. As years passed, Mercy's story traveled quietly across markets, churches, and women's meetings. Aunties who once whispered caution now told her story as instruction, not as gossip, but as guidance. They told young girls, do not fear love, but balance love with wisdom. They said, do not close your heart, but protect your future. They explained that romance without documentation is risk, that promises without participation are fragile, that partnership requires equality, not dependency. Mercy never stood on platforms to shame Mike. She never sought revenge in public humiliation. His name faded naturally from conversations. He became a footnote, an early chapter in a much longer narrative. Sometimes at sunset, Mercy would drive past the river Niger. The water moved with ancient patience, reflecting orange and gold beneath the sky. She would roll down her window and breathe in the humid air, listening to distant drum beats drifting from a celebration somewhere deeper in town. In those moments, she felt peace. Not because the betrayal had not hurt, not because she had forgotten, but because she understood something many people never learn. Betrayal can wound deeply, but it does not have to define the rest of your life. In the rhythm of African drums, in the strength of African women who rebuild families and businesses from nothing, in the dignity of elders who bless resilience more than romance, Mercy found her true revenge, not in destroying Mike, but in living a life so full, so respected, and so powerful that his betrayal became only a small, distant chapter in the long story of who she became. What did you learn from this story of Mercy? Drop a comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. See you tomorrow.